Math 1, Unit 5, Practice Test 14 through the completion. All right, number 14, guys, this is one that is going to be on the test. It is traditionally one that you guys struggle with. Changing, anytime we're asked to change something to slope-intercept form. Remember slope-intercept or y-intercept? Oh, I'm sorry, no, that was number 13. I'm looking up there, number 13. We did that one. Just a quick review of that. Subtract 3x from both sides. We get negative 9y equals negative 3x plus 18. Divide everything by negative 9. And we get y. Negative 9 divided by negative 9 is 1y. Negative 3 divided by negative 9. That cannot go into it evenly, so we'll simply reduce. A negative over a negative is a positive. 3 goes into 3 once, and 3 goes into 9 3 times. 18 divided by negative 9, though, is negative 2. So our y-intercept is negative 2. Our slope is 1/3. So we go to negative 2 right here. B equals negative 2 is right there. And then 1/3 means rise 1, run 3. And we could do it a second time. Rise 1, run 3. And we get our straight edge. And okay, I know we covered that one yesterday, but it ended pretty quick. Any questions on that? Okay, let's get on to 14. This is one that you guys struggle with, finding the x and y intercepts. Okay? And it's really easy. When you want the y-intercept, you plug in 0 for x. Okay, and if we plug in 0 for x, 2 times 0 is 0, so that just goes away. And we're left with 4y equals 12. We divide both sides by 4, and we get y equals 3. That means your y-intercept is at 0, 3. We can graph that or plot that right there. Same thing, if we have 2x plus 4y equals 12, we plug in 0 for y to find the x-intercept. 4 times 0 is 0. That just goes away, and we're left with 2x equals 12. Divide both sides, not by 6, by 2. 2 divided by 2 is 1x. 12 divided by 2 is 6. So our x-intercept is 6, 0. So we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's our x-intercept. And we get that right there. Any questions on number 14? Okay. Finding the x and y-intercept. If you want the x-intercept, you plug in 0 for y. If you want the y-intercept, you plug in 0 for x. You're going to have to do that a couple times on the test. All right. Write the equation of a line in point-slope form with the slope of negative 3 and the point 2, 1. Okay, that for me, please. Okay, so here's your slope-intercept, or I'm sorry, your point-slope form. So it's y minus negative 1. What they need? Okay. M is negative 3 and x minus 2. All right, so you can see we have y minus and then y1 turned out to be a negative 1. So it's negative, negative, so it becomes positive. So it means y plus 1 equals negative 3 times x minus 2. Now, I don't mind if you jump right to this step. If you just go, hey, y minus negative 1, oh, that's a positive. Okay? Any questions on number 15? Now, if you guys can do this, now you could convert this very easily to slope-intercept form if you had to. You have your slope, so it's very easy from there. I think this is really the best way to learn how to write the equation of a line. Okay, moving on to number 16. So graph y equals the absolute value of x plus 1. We want the x-intercept and the y-intercept. All right, so we should remember that the most basic graph of an absolute value equation is y equals the absolute value of x. And remember, the vertex is at the origin. And we have a V-shaped graph with this as a positive 1 slope and this part is a negative 1 slope. Okay, that's our most basic graph of the absolute value equation, y equals the absolute value of x. And we talked about when you add something to the outside, it moves the graph up. When you subtract something from the outside, it moves the graph down. When you add something on the inside, it moves the graph to the left. And when you subtract something on the inside, it moves it to the right. So since we're adding one on the outside, it just moves our graph up 1. So our actual graph of y equals the absolute value of x plus 1 is right there in blue. This just moved our entire graph up 1. Everything went up 1. Okay? So what is the x-intercept? There is no x-intercept, is there? Okay, it's the empty set. None. Empty set if you prefer. Okay? This graph does not contact the x-axis. All right? Now what about the y-intercept? Remember, the y-intercept is where x equals 0. So we have y equals the absolute value of 0 plus 1. The absolute value of 0 is 0, and we just end up with y equals 1. And you can see it right there. So if the absolute value, or excuse me, if the y-intercept is 1, we write it as 0, 1, meaning the x value is 0, the y value is 1. Questions on number 16? All right, again, all these are possible test questions. All right, moving on. Same thing, y equals the absolute value of x plus 1. All right, we just said it. When we add on the inside, it moves it 1 to the left. So that's where now our vertex of our graph will be. And we have a positive 1 slope right here. And we have a negative 1 slope right here. And we can see our x-intercept is at negative 1, 0. And our y-intercept is at 0, 1. So you can just look at your graph and find your x and y-intercepts. The x-intercept is where the graph touches the x-axis. The y-intercept is where the graph touches the y-axis. Now, look what happens. If we plug in negative 1 for x, we get y equals the absolute value of negative 1 plus 1. Negative 1 plus 1 is 0, and we get y equals the absolute value of 0, which is just 0. So you can see how that one works out. Now, if we plug in 0 for x this time, we get y equals the absolute value of 0 plus 1, which means y equals the absolute value of 1, which means y equals 1. So again, you can see when you plug in 0 for x, y equals 1. When you plug in negative 1 for x, y equals 0. So you can see how that works out, hopefully. We can either do this mathematically, or we can graph it and look at it and observe the answer, right? Should be able to do both. All right, moving on. The height h in inches of a tree is given by h equals 2m plus 7, where m is the number of months. And what is the y-intercept and what does it represent? So what's the y-intercept in this problem? Okay, very good. The y-intercept is 7. What does it represent in this particular question? The height, when, though? When? When it was planted, you could say. So think of it this way. I don't know, did we talk about this yesterday in here? Oh, we talked about yesterday, you have plants, maybe they're doing a study on fertilizer growth, and they are going to study a bunch of plants. Well, they want to get all the plants that's starting off at 7 inches tall. That way, when they measure the growth over time, they all have the same starting point, right? So in this case, the y-intercept is 7, meaning when they started measuring, plants all started off at 7 inches tall. Then they measured in a month, and then a second month, and a third month, and they're measuring their growth over time. So maybe some trees or plants grow like this, Others maybe like this, maybe some died, or then maybe that one Miracle-Gro plant grew like that. But you want to have the same starting point, 7 inches right there. You want to have the same starting point for all the plants so that when you compare them, you have something to compare them. So 7 is the y-intercept, which is the starting point when they started measuring. Okay, moving on. Yesterday we're not going to do this question, not going to be on the test, so we're going to ignore that guy. And we're going to go on to number 20. Is each of the following a linear function? Explain. Remember, a linear function has a y to the first power and an x to the first power, or a y to some number. That's the only two ways you'll see a linear function. So that's not. This is y and x are to the first power. This is not. We know that is a absolute value function, so that's out. Here we have an x to the first power and a y to the first power, so your answer is B and D. Alright, final question. Find the equation of a line that passes through the point 3,5 and 6,13. Write the equation of a line in slope-intercept form. State the y-intercept. Okay, so first thing we need is a slope. So we're going to go y equals 13 minus 5 over 6 minus 3. And we get a slope of 8 over 3. That's our slope. Now they want us to write the equation of a line in slope-intercept form. I think it's a great idea to write the equation of a line in point-slope form and convert it. Maybe takes a little more work, but I think it's very consistent. So y minus y1, which is 5, equals the slope, which is 8/3, times x minus 3. That's point-slope form. You're going to have to do that a couple times on the test. Now, to convert it to slope-intercept, we simply go y minus 5 equals 8/3 x. 8/3 times x is 8/3 x. And 8 times negative 3 is negative 24. Negative 24 divided by 3 is negative 8. And now we have to add 5 to both sides. We do that, we get y equals 8/3 x, and then negative 8 plus 5 is negative 3, and there it is in slope-intercept form. You're done. Now, for those of you that prefer to find the b by going y equals mx plus b, and then plugging in your y value, which is 5, right there, and your slope, which we already found is 8/3, and your x, which is 3, and solving for b, that's okay too. We get 5, and again 8 times 3 is 24, divided by 3 is 8, plus b. Now we subtract 8 from both sides. When you're solving this, you should see a lot of these numbers are the same, aren't they? Because we're basically working the same problem in a slightly different way. 5 plus negative 8 is negative 3. So now we have your slope over here, we have your y-intercept, and it's simply y equals 8/3 x minus 3. So either way you do it, it comes out the same. I think this is just a little more routine. You do it that way every time. This way, I just know from the past other students have struggled this way, but if you're good at it, by all means do it that way. Any questions?